And now we are about to bring in our third guest, Dr. Bynum. Dr. Bynum is coming in. Tara Bynum, Reading Pleasures, Everyday Black Living in Early America. I like the way that she decided to make her entrance by showing us her book. She was not playing with y'all tonight. Hello, Dr. Bynum. How are you?
I'm good. It's actually Tara, not Sarah.
Oh, excuse me. Thank you for correcting me, because I do not like saying people's name wrong. And if I had said your
Yeah.
name wrong for the whole show and you didn't tell me, I would have been upset with you.
Well, the good news is that I only like being called the right name, so I don't mind correcting people.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you for being on the show. Welcome to Black Authors Matter TV.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here tonight.
Well, I'm excited to have you. So, I'm guessing that was the book we're going to be talking about that was on your intro screen. So, could you tell us
Yes.
all about it?
So the Reading Pleasures, Everyday Black Living in Early America it's a book about kind of the way Black people felt good in the 18th and 19th centuries. And what I kind of wanted to do was showcase four authors: Phyllis Wheatley, John Merritt, James Albert, Ukasa Graniosa, and David Walker, and to think about the ways that they wrote about and talked about kind of feeling good, and oftentimes in the most mundane sorts of ways. So there's friendship, there's religious faith, there's righteous anger. All of it works together to kind of give them the joy that I think also might feel really familiar, but isn't often discussed.
Yeah. I don't know if you heard the last line that I said to the last guest, when I said that we need to stop making reading a punishment and start looking at it as a reward. I remember, growing up, go to your room and read a book. Well, my parents never told me that, because I liked reading anyway. But there are some people who that was a punishment. Go to your room and read a book, instead of it being a reward, or being a treat that you get to read a book, explore another world. So when I see the title Reading Pleasures, I just felt like that just went right along with that.
Yeah, and I think that when I thought about Reading Pleasures, I was thinking on kind of multiple levels. Like, I think about the pleasure of reading these texts, the pleasure that the authors derived from writing correspondence, writing a narrative, writing kind of a pamphlet. I think too about the kind of way that we kind of collectively understand pleasure right now, and also over time. I think there are many valences to the idea of reading pleasures, but at base it is about enjoying reading, and reading is something that we all do. So it's not kind of limited to punishment at all. Even, just interacting with everyday life is a kind of reading.
Absolutely. Now, the other part is, I like the subtitle, Everyday Black Living in Early America. And then it says, four Black writers expressing inner joy. So I think everything that you said just encompasses that.
I think so too. That's what I'm hoping for anyway.
Well, I'm sure it's going to happen. I don't know. I sometimes I just don't understand when people say they don't read or they don't like to read. Now, I do understand that this is a busy time that we're in now. People just don't have the social time that they used to, or the relaxed time. So they're always on the go. Even when we're at home, we're on our computers doing something. So I do understand that, but I just never understood not wanting to delve into that world, or just losing yourself in a good story.
What I think is funny is that kind of now, more than ever, like, we are often reading something. And I think that social media kind of actually has had us reading quite a bit, whether it's the comments on something or the kind of AI generated text on something else. So unlike the kind of television era where you're not reading anything, you're literally watching stuff. I think that this is a very interesting sort of text-based time. So I think I'm always struck at people's relationship to reading presently,
Yes.
when like right now it's so much a part of what we do and how we interact with things. I also think there's a whole conversation that we could have about like life as a text itself. It doesn't need to have words on it to be something that we make sense of. But I think that, we are consuming words all the time and reading and interpreting and making sense of them. I mean, how many
Right.
text messages do you get in a day? That's a reading practice in and of itself, which is not necessarily the same as reading a book. But I think that the idea that someone doesn't like reading, it almost doesn't make sense to me, because now more than, kind of 20 years ago, 30 years ago, folks are reading all of the time and have to read all of the time in order to kind of interact with the world as it is presently.
Amen to that. And I'm moving back over to the book though. You talked about four writers who express feeling joy while being enslaved. How how do you do one? How do you express joy while feeling enslaved or while being enslaved?
Well, not all of them are actually enslaved.
Okay, okay.
John Marin is not enslaved. But I think that is a question that kind of, interestingly for me, limits Black people's capacity to feel. Um, and it's one that I have kind of wrestled with in terms of like, why would it be the case that Black people would not be able to experience a complexity of emotions no matter their circumstances?
I
Um,
agree. I agree.
and I think that it's interesting that how we learn about the past, when we learn about it with Black people in it, presumes that there's only one way for Black people to feel. And I think in any other context, that would not make sense. So, one thing that I had to do as I kind of embarked upon this project was, I think this might be anachronistic for some folks, but I think that it's important to think about. As I thought about the oldest person that I knew, who was my grandmother. She was born in 1918. There's a way to talk about her story as a Black woman born in the mountains of Western Maryland. And, certainly a story that has segregation in it, has all of the various isms, racism, sexism, et cetera, in it. And yet, if I had to tell the story of my grandmother, I don't know that I would lead with that. I
Mm.
also wouldn't say that I never saw her smile, or I never saw her kind of have fun. And, if we go further back, if I was able to ask her who her elders were, like, would she also be like, they never laughed, they never enjoyed
Right,
themselves? And if
right.
we keep going, kind of playing that game, I think, like, why would we assume that um when I was born is when people started smiling, or when you were born people started smiling, or the students in my class who were at this point all born in the 21st century, like, when they got to Earth, that's when Black people started smiling. Like, there's something actually absurd about that. And so, I've been left to kind of wonder about, like, what would have us decide that because of the experience of enslavement, that there's only one way for Black people to feel. And that's kind of sad about being
It is sad,
Black,
and
presumably.
that's the reason why I asked the question, because often, and we see it today, where and social media is a crazy place, where people will get on social media and say, while y'all are laughing and talking, such and such is going on over here. Or while y'all are laughing and talking, Black people are catching hell over there. And they make it seem like we're not supposed to be happy, or we're not supposed to have joy, or we can't feel two things at one time. And so I guess that was the reason why I asked the question, not that people who were enslaved or marginally free couldn't be happy. But I just really wanted to dive into that feeling that we can express joy, but at the same time, still not like the circumstance that we're in. It doesn't mean that we have to
Of
always
course.
walk around frowning.
Yeah. And, I think that I'm a Black woman whose family is from the United States. Like, how do I get here if if everyone is suffering all the time?
Right, right, right.
And I think that's just, to some extent, just real practical for me. Like, if if there's nothing like happiness, if there's nothing like joy, if there's nothing like just feeling good, um, yeah, how do I get here? And
Right.
I know that I'm here. We're having a conversation. So I think that also has been kind of a guiding way of thinking for me. It's like, how do I get here if the story is singular in this way?
Now, you mentioned your students. I believe you're a professor at the University of Iowa.
I'm a professor at the University of Iowa. I sure am. English and African American Studies.
Wow. You know what? I will tell you, I went to Loyola University in New Orleans, and one of my favorite classes was an African American Studies class. And I will tell you, that professor, Professor Osby, I'll never forget her, was my toughest professor. She made sure that we knew how to write. I remember one time I wrote this long paper. I just knew it. And she
Uh-huh.
gave me that failing grade. I said, Professor Alvin, this paper was 25 pages long. She said, yeah, it was long, all right.
Oh.
But I credit her as well as another professor I had, Professor Edgar Giroux. They really made me a better writer because they had
Mm.
such high standards. And so I don't know, just listening to you, I'm feeling like I'm channeling those professors. And so I just wonder, with especially with the classes that you teach, the discussions that may take place in your classroom, do you talk about a lot of these things? And do you have, I'm quite sure you do, but I want you to talk about it. But do you have these same standards, these high standards for your students?
Oh, I certainly want my students to learn, and I want
Yes.
them to be able to demonstrate their learning. And I I prefer reading work that's really good. So I try
Yes.
to support them in the various drafting and revision processes that are required when writing. So, I certainly value good work and understand the importance of good work. And, I think that my courses, it's often the case that we've got they're African American literature courses. So it's often the case that we are kind of wrestling with these sorts of themes. And, I think more and more students want there to be representations of Black joy. And I think that that's an interesting sort of desire on their part, because sometimes it seems to presume that joy is pure unto itself, that
Mm.
someone can just be excited and that's the whole story, or someone can be joyful and that's the whole story. And yet I think that the best stories, there's always some sort of tension. And there are also times when people delight in their anger, people delight in the failure of other people, so I don't think joy is always the cleanest or the purest sort of feeling. So it's interesting to kind of watch them as they expand their thinking about what African American literature is, and also, like, within the school context, expand their ideas of what Black people are allowed to do or what Black people are allowed to feel.
So do you have a pretty diverse student base? Or do you find that because I noticed when I was in school and I was taking these classes, there were a lot of African American students who took these classes, but we also had a sprinkling of other cultures in the class as well.
I think that I think there's always an interesting assortment of perspectives, ideas, people. Um, yeah, I feel like I never know who I'm going to get in my classes, but it's always exciting that the classes are full of students who are interested in learning what it is that I have expertise in, and that's fun.
Yeah, and I think it's fun too because for a lot of people, including African Americans, sometimes it opens their eyes up to maybe some literature that they may not have been exposed to before.
I mean, that's often the case. My research is pretty exclusively in the 18th century, and
Mhm.
a lot of folks assume that there is nothing for me to look at. There's poet Phyllis Wheatley, and that's about it. And that's in and of itself a wrong assumption. So I'm often kind of working against even just a sort of very basic, like Black people have been writing for a long time, and they've been writing all kinds of things, even in the 18th century, even in centuries before, their voice appears, or they are being represented in some way that is worth interrogating. So yeah, I think it's interesting to have this particular expertise and to know that very few people are aware of the fact that Black people are writing anything in before 1800, before Frederick Douglass.
Mm, yeah, it's amazing how much we're still learning about our own history.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And there's so much, I think that's what blows my mind, is that there's so much. And yet, I think that it seems to me that school systems across the kind of country have, and long before kind of present day politics, but have convinced um have convinced the populace that Black people weren't doing anything, and somehow we've come to believe it too. And I think that blows me away, because I
Mm,
don't know that would why that would be believable, and yet it has been.
you said a mouthful right there. So I want to move back to your book. Your book was just published this year, is that correct? What month was it
Yeah,
published?
January 10th,
Wow,
2023.
January 10th, 2023. Now is this required reading in the classroom?
Not my classroom, but I hope it's required reading in somebody's classroom.
Well,
I'm
do
not the
you
professor that makes my students buy my book.
I was just going to say that I was just going to ask that. Are you ever going to make it part of the curriculum? It just seems like it would go well with what you're teaching.
I mean, I think it does, but because they have me, I
Yeah,
think
you're
it's
right.
okay for me to just talk.
I can
Um,
understand that. I can.
yeah, like they can just um yeah, talk to me.
Yeah, I mean, and I think I think if I were in your position, I don't know if I would, because I don't know. I'd be nervous about saying, okay, you have to buy my book. So I'd be a little nervous about that. So
You
I
know,
was just wondering.
no, it's not required reading for me, but I hope that others will make use of it.
Yeah, I definitely want it. So I will be ordering it.
Oh, great.
What are
Fantastic.
your goals with the book? Do you plan to do any touring with it?
So I have had the opportunity to present my research in relation to the book, and in a variety of places. I'm certainly grateful for the opportunity. I think my goal is to, kind of start or pick up or extend the conversation about kind of basically the way that Black people have enjoyed themselves across time. If there was a way to kind of create a sort of historiography of that and have that kind of in relation to the stories that might feel a bit more familiar, um, so that we can work to think of Black people as historical agents and also as three-dimensional, even in the
Mm,
past. I think that like we might be much more able to envision that, kind of very sort of present day, but I think we're less likely to imagine that in centuries past.
Mm. And you just said another mouthful. I wish we could talk to you for another 30 minutes. I'm just really enjoying this conversation. So let wanted to talk with you just a bit about what you did to prepare for writing this book. I mean, was it a lot of research, or were you already pretty learned on these particular subjects that you wrote about, the four writers that you wrote about?
So this is my first book, and it's a book I would say with many origin stories.
Mm,
Um, I think that the kind of first sort of origin story is that these are ideas that I'm working on when I start my dissertation a very long time ago. So I think that I have probably been wrestling with the concerns of this book maybe for like almost 20 years.
really?
Yeah, it's been a long time.
So wow. So
It's been a long time.
when did you decide, okay, it's been 20 years, enough is enough. It's time to actually write this book and
So
get
I
it out
think
there.
that I like truly started writing this as a
Mhm.
book um in 2016.
Okay.
Um and before that, like I guess the earliest iteration, which does not look like anything like the book that is kind of published and in print, was my dissertation. So the dissertation kind of is the first iteration of these ideas. But in
What was your
2016, I
dissertation?
decided, what was it?
Yeah.
That was a long time ago. It was loosely connected to this book. I can't remember the name
Okay.
of it. I don't know what I was talking about, but that's what I started writing 20 years ago. So
Mhm.
um 2016 is when I actually kind of decide now is the time to like write this book. Um, yeah.
Wow. So, I mean, it's always interesting to me when I meet authors who say that, it took them a long time to write the book. Not that it took you a long time to write, but often it's the thought process that was behind actually starting to write.
Oh, for
So,
sure. I also think too that there's a funny way that like life can like position you. So, I think if this book came out in 2008, I think it would hit very differently, because that's kind of before Black Lives Matter. That's before the idea of the hashtag and like Black Joy as a hashtag. Um, so I think that my book ends up kind of coming out at a time when these are the conversations that folks want to have. So if it had come out in 2008 or 2010 or an earlier time, I would have had a book sooner. But I don't know that it would have the opportunity to have the same impact that I feel like it is having.
totally hear you. Now, how was the book structured? I was reading, I guess it was kind of a review of the book, and it mentioned that is, I don't know if some of the book or all of the book is in a first person narrative.
No, so because it's an academic book,
Okay.
it has an introduction, and then there are four chapters that we can kind of think of as case studies.
Okay.
So there's a chapter on Phyllis Wheatley, John Merritt, James Albert Ukasar and David Walker. And what I do in each chapter is look at, by way of their particular kind of writing, I look at how they talk about and you know wrestle with good feelings. So Phyllis Wheatley has poems and letters to a friend named Uber Tanner, who's also an enslaved at times woman from Newport, Rhode Island. And then there are two kind of conversion narratives, one by James Albert Ukasal Graniosa and another by John Merritt. And then there's David Walker's Appeal, which is a pamphlet published in 1829. So I look at each of each of their writings and kind of use their writings to theorize what it is that they're in fact trying to say about joy. So it's less first person, though first person does appear, and much
I see.
more about the author and my engagement with the author.
I see. Well, we only have a few minutes left, believe it
Uh-huh.
or not. It
I know
goes
that went by quick.
I tell you, it does it all the time. It goes by so fast.
You're not
But
lying.
I did put a link in the chat for people to purchase the book. And the link that I
Thank
put
you.
in the chat was I guess it was University of Illinois.edu.
Yes, University of Illinois Press that published it, not Iowa.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I did put that link in the chat. But how can is that the only place that people can find the book, or is it actually is it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or anything like that?
It's on Amazon, for
Wonderful.
sure. Yeah. So Amazon and University of Illinois Press are the two places to get the book.
Wonderful. And then can people reach out to you in any way?
So I think the easiest way is to email me at my university email. I don't have any of the social
No social
medias.
media.
No, I'm archaic in that way,
Oh,
but
stop. Not archaic. Some people just don't want to do social media, and that's okay.
that's okay, right? And I'm one that does not want to do social media. So a good old-fashioned email will have to suffice.
Well, Barbara Crump said that she is looking forward to reading your book.
Thank you.
And Bernita said, this sounds like her kind of book.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Yes.
And then she said she Googled you, so she's gonna find you.
Okay, that's fantastic. I'm definitely easy to Google, which is helpful since I don't have social media.
And like I said, it is totally all right. But I believe I love the book. I'm going to be ordering the book myself. Just I haven't had a chance to read the book, but just reading up on it, it does sound like my kind of book. Do you have it on Kindle? Do you have it on audio yet or anything like that?
So it's not an audio book. There are ebook versions of it, and there's print and paperback.
Okay, so we still have a couple of options to read this book. It's okay.
There are a couple options for sure.
Well, I want to thank you for, first of all, for sharing these stories and putting them in a book. Like I said, I'm not saying it just because I'm hosting the show. This is a book that I want to read, and I will be ordering this book. But I want to thank you for sharing these stories, and I want to thank you for taking the time to be on Black Authors Matter TV tonight.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This has been a delight and a treat.
Oh, thank you so much. And I'm sorry you weren't able to meet Gwen. I don't know if you heard earlier, she's on vacation this week.
Oh,
So that's why it was just me doing interview tonight. But everybody seemed to be enjoying you. You're getting a lot of comments in the chat. So I know you're not on social media, so I don't know if you can see the comments.
no, I can't see because I'm legit not on social media.
Well, they are listening. So and
that's good. That's good.
You're probably going to get some hits later tonight on your website.
Okay, thanks so much.
And thank you. You enjoy your evening. Have a wonderful week, and keep doing what you're doing for our youth and for our history.
I appreciate it. This was great. Thank you.
Thank you. You have a great night. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.